This is going to be the creation story. We're going to start with that portion. Ashe, big Ashe. Thank y'all for joining. Share the live. Peace, peace. We're going to be reading from my holy tablets. Peace, family. Peace. I hope y'all sun gazed today. I hope y'all got out there and grounded, exercised and trained a little bit, meditated. Peace, peace. We got about 24 in here. I'm going to start reading. We delving into the holy tablets. All right. This is chapter 1. All right. All right. We're going to get into this. Free Dr. Malachi York. So this is tablet 9, the evolutionary process. All right. 19 times 14 equals 266. It says, you are about to embark upon a truth. I shall take you a step further into the world of true right knowledge, right wisdom, and a right understanding. For many years, humans have pondered about the evolution of the inhabitants of the planet Earth. The question was in the minds of humans as to where each species and each life form evolved. You must learn of the evolutionary process. This will give you the great knowledge of that which is right and exact, and right wisdom, right understanding, and sound right reasoning of how and where the 9th ether versus the 6th ether came about. Now let us begin by learning of a time before, when a large craft from the Ninga fleet, thought to be a meteorite, crashed into the planet, shearing off the lower half of it. That was 24 billion years ago. This caused the development of Earth's shape and form as you know it today, bringing with it new kinds of life forms. All right, some to make residence beneath the seas of what is called Bimini today, where a great empire of reptilians thrive even unto this day. This empire located in the Atlantic Ocean in an area called the Bermuda Triangle or Angel's Triangle. All right. Other life forms took shape on the surface of the earth. It was gases and electrical sparks that formed the complex molecules from the simple ones originally planted here 76 trillion years ago. For billions of years, life continued to consist of no more than simple cells, yet with intelligence. As life passed, more complicated cells were born, and these cells gradually became even more complicated cells, which were giving birth until they eventually combined with each other or married to give birth to even larger organisms. The more complicated an organism, such as an algae, the larger its brain is. Thus, the more intelligent it became. All right. These living organisms evolved out of the water through the ammonia and onto the soil. Millions of years after that, the next group of animals developed called metazoans. Their bodies were composed of specialized cells grouped to form tissues, organs, and systems, much like the animals of today. Okay? These animals multiplied and diversified, and over a period of 19 million years evolved into man. Many types of animals and dragons called terrible lizards or simply dinosaurs. This was the first evolution of life on the planet Earth. These inhabitants went through many changes such as the Ice Age, glaciers, volcanoes, and earthquakes. During this time, there were also problems with the dinosaurs and humans. So, according to this text, humans and dinosaurs actually existed at the same time. They inhabited this plane of existence simultaneously, according to this text. The evolution of the dinosaurs and humans was imbalanced to the point that the dinosaurs were much bigger than humans, and they were killing them off. These humans were of the Homo erectus species that had 6 ether hair covering most of the bodies. Dinosaurs are classified or divided into separate groups. One being the Saurusha, lizard hips. He's a 4-legged plant-eating dinosaur and can also be a meat-eating dinosaur. Okay? So he's a plant and meat-eating dinosaur simultaneously. Follow me. All right? And the other being the Ornithica, bird hip. This group of dinosaurs is your 2-legged plant eaters and all of your armored dinosaurs. And your Ornithica, the forward-pointing bone, has swung around in order that it can point backwards and forwards. And the Saurusha have hip bones that are found within reptiles. These 3 bones point in different directions. Then 2 names are in reference to the arrangement of 3 bones of the pelvis. And the Saurusha, these bones were arranged similar to that of a modern crocodile and lizard. These are your Tanin, while the pelvis of the Ornithischia was bird-like. Therefore, humans developed from a one-celled animal which developed into a water creature. And these humans are tadpoles or reptilians for the first 3 months in their mother's womb. This is why humans still have webbed hands, gills, and scales. In their own evolution, with the help of their mammalian parent, they became the root seed of mammals later, called the human being. And then they show you the tadpole right here. How the tadpole kind of looked like the sperm cell. It looked very similar, right? How the amphibious tadpole looked very similar to the sperm cell. Look at that. Pay attention to that. All right? All right, so where was we at? Called the human being. In its primeval state, they climbed upon a landmass and developed into land creatures, and then to genus Homo onto Homo amaeus, and then land creatures that were once tadpoles or reptilians grew while in their mother's womb from 3 months plus 3 months more. During that period, they were connected to an umbilical cord, umbilicus or navel, that is on the abdomen or the fetus and is connected to the placenta. This mark on the surface of the abdomen of mammals who once dwelt in a marina or water is where the umbilical cord, also called umbilicus, was the central point or middle, is attached during the gestation. The very word navel comes from the Middle English word nephilia, and it's the same as the Aramaic Hebrew down Nephilim, to fall down, which is the same word in its phonetics or of the language. It is the clear picture in these days and times that the words navy, naval, and marina tie in. This is a confession that man was a tadpole and was considered a sea creature. Okay? Life forms that evolved from the sea were water vertebrates. They did not appear until 50 million years ago. And land vertebrates followed about 100 million years ago. About 225 million years ago, there were fish in the waters as well as sea plants. Most amphibians had made the transition from water to dry land. The plants on the dry land attracted the amphibians to evolve into reptiles. The dolphins as a whale went from the stars to the plant in the sea. Okay, so hold on. I'm going to read that again. The dolphin as a whale went from the stars to the plant in the sea, then onto land, then back into the sea as a whale. Crocodiles are a remnant of that evolutionary phase also. From about 225 million years ago to 65 million years ago, which is the period of time often referred to as the dinosaur age, evolved two main lines of egg-laying reptilians. Those who could fly, which evolved into birds, like the pterodactyls, from the Greek pteron, meaning feather, wing, and dactyls from the Greek, meaning finger. And those who roamed and dominated the plant earth as dinosaurs, called the Tyrannosaurus rex, tyrant reptile, or terrible lizards. These reptiles evolved alongside with a variety of amphibians and water lizards, away from the oceans and their water life, which was fully of activity. When humans came out of water, your solution jumped billions of years. When humans crawl on land, they were in the form of what looked like crocodiles. If you examine the back of the spinal columns of humans, you can see knots up and down the spinal column. Millions of years ago, it was a fin. This fin or cell was used to conduct heat and regulate heat in the body and had to mutate. Behemoth mankind to this day still has at the end of the spinal column an extension called a coccyx, that is a tail, as well as wings under the arms and webbed hands. This human developed from what you call a dinosaur today. This dinosaur was called a Demetrion. It got its name from it having that which is unique, that being two sets of teeth. No other animal had two sets of teeth. The Demetrion lived about 60 to 300 million years ago, which means that it lived in the end of the Paleozoic era. Demetrion was a large meat-eating reptile which measured some 10 to 12 feet from nose to tail and 5 feet in height, which explains why many humans have a craving for flesh. When the Demetrion, who was of the Paleozoic era, ruled, this deadly creature roamed the valley before the dinosaurs of the Mesozoic era. The Demetrion was the first to ever inhabit the land. It was a warm-blooded reptile. Demetrion is a deadly reptile known for the enormous cell on its back. The cell was used for the purpose of regulating body heat. By tuning the cell to face the sun, the Demetrion was able to warm up much more quickly, in about little less than an hour, which allowed the Demetrion more time to hunt. A reptile can't stay active if it's too hot. However, without the heat, reptiles become more sluggish, still helpless. But mammals can regulate the heat of their bodies because they are warm-blooded. Demetrion is not an ordinary reptile. The resemblance between human and Demetrion was the teeth. Both human and Demetrion have two sets of teeth, which were the incisors, canines. Different sized teeth behind the canines. This is only found on mammals. 360 million years before the Demetrion, some creatures crawled out of the ocean which were early amphibians. Within 20 million years, they split into two groups. One became the aggressive species, which were the diapside, and the other ones were the passive synapside. These they begged to compete for supremacy. From generation to generation, each line improved and perfected itself. Within the diaspids and the synapsids, move further upon the evolutionary chain, begin to split in different directions. Turtles, while the synapsids had a single hole in the back of their skulls, which evolved into all proto-mammals, such as Dimerodon, armadillo, whale, dogs, cows, human, and all other mammals that evolved in this line. The two holes allowed the skull not to squeeze the brain. Proto-mammals were changing from reptilian to mammalian, and from a mammal-like reptilian posture, they took possession of the land masses for 50 million years and dominated the plant. Demetrion's first descendants were hot-blooded. This was a detour in evolution. They took steps from reptilian, and this is how the Demetrion looked. Okay? Can y'all see that? Yeah, remember that dinosaur? The cell on his back? They can regulate the cell towards the sun or move it to basically adjust the temperature of the body heat, basically. All right? And according to this text and this information, they're alleging that we derive from this being. Now, when they talk about the coccyx, some humans were born with tails. All right? This is actual evidence. All right? There's evidence of humans having a coccyx at the end of the spinal column. All right? Some humans are born with tails. You can do your homework on it. All right? Now, it states, the dinosaurs started to take control and the proto-mammals begin to disappear. In the Triassic period, 245 million years ago, thus larger, more vulnerable animals begin a long conquest and push proto-mammals to the brink of extinction. The lizard-like Amphipicodon and a warm-blooded Demetrion reduced in size. Proto-mammals had to adapt to nightlife, becoming nocturnal hunters. As proto-mammals begin to mutate and evolve out of its present state, the size of their brain grew. During this time, extraterrestrials had leaped in and started breeding also. Although life evolved from the seas, all of it did not originate there. Some life forms crashed in the seas of Tiamat from the Meldic Ancient, particularly from the Ninga star fleet, that being from another star constellation, and they lived under the seas of Tiamat. Okay? These other life forms were beings known as the troglodytes or Meldecians, which crashed down on Tiamat. One of the four Meldecian crafts, called the West Wind, crashed into the center of the planet Earth. These beings lived in the seas of Tiamat Earth for millions of years. Their home base is under the Bermuda Triangle. All right? They set up kingdoms called yams under the waters. The Meldecians developed into intelligent humanoids by abducting and mixing their seed with human. All right? This is where the reptilian-like dinosaurs came from. While on one hand, there was another set of extraterrestrial beings like the Greys, from which some of the dinosaurs evolved from. All right? These Greys came from the constellation Orion, the star constellation of Arcturus and Pleiades. Meanwhile, the reptilians ruled from Rigel, Betelgeuse, and Bellatrix, Mintaka, Alinam, and Alanatek, and the Orion star constellation and Aruga, and the Capella star formation. They were all in fear of the aggressive insect-type extraterrestrials from Andromeda, many of which came down to the planet Earth. One of the common species of dinosaurs that evolved from the Ramadian Sea of Greys was the Hypsilophodon, who came out of the Jurassic period. They were called Hypsilophodon because of their high ridged teeth. The Hypsilophodon were herbivores. They only ate off plants and fruits, extracting the needed chlorine. The most common dinosaur that evolved from the reptilians were the Tyrannosaurus rex, meaning tyrant reptile or terrible lizard. It is 50 feet long and 20 feet in height and weighs 7 tons. It was the largest carnivore to ever walk the planet Tiamat Earth. This creature is known to be the king of the meat eaters. The Tyrannosaurus rex came out of the reptilian, making them part dinosaur and part reptilian. And this is how the Hypsilophodon look. All right. And obviously the Tyrannosaurus rex, you've seen pictures of this being. All right. And there's different star constellations right there. All right, so the Boutez constellation, when they talk about Benjamin Franklin and the kite and all that, that's actually referring to the constellation. All right. And you got Orion. All right, so these are the constellations these various beings came from and descended from. Alongside the dinosaur, you had the evolutionary humans. Amongst the different species of evolutionary human, you have the Australopithecus. There were 2 forms of Australopithecus that could walk and were erect. Their brains was 1/3 the size of a modern human's brain. The smaller ones stood about 4 feet tall and weighed about 50 to 120 pounds. This was your original Pygmy, Cushite, and Hawthite tribe, which your mother Haya, Eve, came from. They had 9 ether hair. The larger ones were 7 feet and weighed 222 to 250 pounds. This was your original Watusi Kuthite tribe, which Cadman Adam came from. They had 8 ether hair. They were the giants in the earth. All other humans had 6 ether hair. As other animals of this planet Earth, 9 ether hair is a symbol of an extraterrestrial being. All right? All animals and humans on this planet have 6 ether hair. Cadman Zakar, also known as Adam, was also a mixture of Hindu, the original black man, mixed with the Shaggy, which is another set of beings that was coming to Earth from the Sirius star constellation. These Shaggies were not your hairy Bigfoot creatures. They came from the planet Iduma and the constellation of Sirius. Along with these Shaggies, the Greys also came from the same star constellation from Zeta Reticuli called Sirius B for a biological entity. The Ramadians, called Greys, came from the planet Pleiades and Arcturus. When the Nibiru passed by Sirius B, its presence drained the energy from the sun and caused the great star Sirius B to collapse. Sirius A had 2 planets. The Narians, an independent species of Greys, were on one planet, and the Nomos reptilians, were on the other. Both planets rotated around Sirius A. So when their sun died, the Narians followed Nibiru through the Milky Way. While in pursuit, these beings, the reptilian, chased the Greys. The Ramadians also lived on Sirius because they wanted to rule over them and use them as slaves. Some of the Ramadians came down to the planet Earth from Zeta Reticuli. Both beings, the Nomos and the Ramadians, took residence on planet Tiamat Earth. When the reptilians came, they tried to appeal to the Meldekians, troglodytes. They were living in the seas from the crash down that happened years ago because they were of their seed. However, these Meldekians who live beneath the seas of the planet Earth had a very violent nature. The reptilians had to take residence in caverns beneath the surface of the Earth or in deep swamp areas in the planet Earth. They set out to conquer the Ramadians and take rule over them. Because of their passive nature, some of the Ramadians came down to the planet Earth from Zeta Reticuli. They went directly to the original Pygmy tribe of Bushmen and South. All right, and this is how some of them looked. All right, they were actually becoming more humanoid looking. All right, the reptilian beings, according to this text. All right, and again, the Meldekians or the troglodytes were mixing and basically combining genetics with the Pygmies and different tribes and so forth. All right, to create these beings. All right, so this is the concept of us having the reptilian brain. All right, so just keep following me. We're going to keep reading a little bit. All right, and then they show the Australopithecus. All right, the evolutionary. That's the Australopithecus. All right, we're gonna keep going into this information. It's very interesting. All right, so let's see here. So it says they went directly to the original pygmy tribe of Bushmen in South Africa, who were the Kishites, Kushites, and Hothites. They live amongst these beings, and the Ramadians taught this tribe of the Anunnaki and of the beings from the star Sirius. The Kushites and the Hothites became a mixture of these supernatural beings or extraterrestrial beings. These supernatural beings are the Ramadians' grays that existed in the Nile River of the barren and rocky land of Nuba. They were associated with peace and harmony only. The Pygmies called these supernatural beings Bahar, Malakut, or river angels. They lived in underwater castles. They were associated with 4 categories of human preoccupations: fertility, cultivation, marriage, and health. Then on the arrival of the reptilians, who in pursuit of the Ramadians also crashed down amongst the Dogon tribes and began to teach them by shadow hours and retreat to the sea by day. So they came out in the nighttime, they gave them knowledge. They came out at nighttime hours and they was giving the Dogon tribe different sciences and information. This is how the Dogon tribe knew everything about Sirius A, Sirius B, and Sirius C way before any telescopic invention was designed. All right. They told them they were the nomos. They had come to guide them if they would tell them the location of the secret caves that the agreeable Ramadians dwelled in. These Bushmen, the Kushites, were of the family of the Nekabu, including the Dogon tribe. Today they live in the deserts of the Kalahari and what is called Africa today. The Nomos reptilians were called Dogri or Dogri by the Nubians. They were also referred to as the ugly water beings. The reptilians can be seen in daylight. However, they would roam mostly in the deep, dark swamps and the marshlands. They took on different forms to appeal to the humans. All right, so they hid their image. Humans considered them grotesque, so they would take on different forms. All right, to appeal to the humans. They had a very violent nature. Which horrified most of these people. All right, and Credo Mutwa talked a lot about these beings. All right, so his story does correlate with this. He referred to him as Chiptawari. All right, he had different names for him, but Credo Mutwa, the shaman, all right, he actually spoke of these beings as well. His story does correlate. All right, they always came out of the shadow hour and hung around date trees. The Dogri enjoy eating the dates of the trees. They also came onto land during the shadow hours to teach and mix with the Dogons. There they were mixing with the Dogons too, okay? They would kidnap the virgins and grape them to implant their seed. It became a ritual to offer virgins in order to prevent the bloodshed, all right? And that's the same thing they're doing now. They're doing the same thing with these reptilians currently, all right? Most of the kids that are child trafficked and these subterranean bases are given voluntarily to avoid conflict. They do that maliciously. They purposely hand them over adrenochrome to avoid any form of violent nature from the Draco. All right, and we still see this. They've been doing this to this planet for millennia. All right, clearly this is evident. They would kidnap the virgins and grape them to implant their seed. It became a ritual to offer virgins in order to prevent the bloodshed. A negotiator was elected called a Hogos. Every 60 years, they would seek these virgins. This in turn led to female child sacrificial rituals, all right, to these serpent people, sacrificial rituals, blood sacrifices and rituals, all right. These serpent people becoming willing blood sacrifices to what became known as Ha-Satan, or Satan, all right. The head of the reptilian tribes, also called Shaitan, became a common practice, like an honor and a way to appease these malevolent beings. The Dogons of Mali and West Africa speak and teach that these have been taught by these 2 tribes of extraterrestrials to this very day. The reptilians told the people of Nubia that they were lawgivers, and the people called Nomos, which is summon nar, saman, poison, in Syriac Arabic as found in the Quran or Quran. And here are some pictures of the Dogon tribe. All right. Pictures of the Dogon tribe they would commemorate. Now, some of the beings wasn't malevolent. They had malevolent, and they had beings that were also benevolent beings as well that taught them. All right, the ancient statues prove that the Dogon mixed with the reptilians. All right, so I'm gonna show y'all that ancient statues prove that the Dogons mixed with the reptilians. A lot of the statues to this day with the reptilian humanoid structures is evidence that these beings were basically mixed with the Dogon tribe. They were mixed in genetics. All right, and to this day, there's extraterrestrial genetics on this planet. All right, when they tell you a person has syndactyl and they have that reptilian scaly skin, they have more reptilian than normal. The our complex portion of the brain is the reptilian portion of the brain. All right, which deals with flight and things of that nature. All right. They taught them about calculations and about the Saigu, a 60-year period. They also lived in underwater cities linked to caverns deep in the earth. You have 8 caverns occupied by extraterrestrials. This does not include Agartha. The ruling species of the underworld are mini Dawanis called gnomes, which stand 3 foot tall, have porcupine-like quills protruding from their bodies. They live near lava and other volcanic environments. They live off insects and worms. They are extremely intelligent, taking pride in mastering all of the science and literature of the surface people. I once met a Dawani who could recite all of William Shakespeare. He knew the best of lines from the 7th century up. He would discuss everything from the Korean, the Bhagavad Gita, the Torah, and the Sigmund Freud, and the architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright. They are extremely friendly and are of no threat to human beings, yet they have no interest in coexisting with human beings. On the surface, who they see as killers without purpose. Okay, so the Dawanis see us as killers without purpose on the surface. All right, they will mingle with the humans in Agartha, but as far as the surface, a lot of these beings won't make themselves known to us. So when people ask why don't extraterrestrial biological entities come down, it's primarily because of the frequency of the planet. It's too much tumultuous, malevolent energy on this planet. All right, you don't even want to be here. Think about it. All right. They grew. So where was we at? They're extremely friendly and are no threat to human beings, yet they have no interest in coexisting with human beings on the surface, who they see as killers without purpose. Next, there's the Simian Duro, called Ganesha by the Hindus, who are born by hatching from eggs that are 4 to 6 feet in diameter. They grow to 7 feet and are extremely obese, having 2 stomachs, and they cheweth the cud. All right, these are the beings that are basically pale. They have the trunks like elephants, and they are obese. They have very pale skin, and they're malevolent in nature. They don't like humans. They feel like they own a planet. All right, the Simian Dero has no apparent fingernails or toenails, nipples, or navel or rectum. They regurgitate their food. Their eyes are light blue. They have blonde eyebrows and pinkish gray colored skin, much like the corpse of a Caucasian. Their home was in caverns beneath Turkey. All right. Having not been exposed to the inner or outer sun, they have no teeth, but their mouth appears to be full of a gummy, slimy substance. They are nocturnal and hear extremely well. They're not very peaceful and have a great dislike for humans. They are very human in appearance, yet far from it. They have a long trunk-like nose, much like an elephant. They contend that the planet Earth is theirs originally, and it will be theirs again one day. All right, the Simian Duru are constantly in conflict with the Dawani, who hold the same faith that they were both the original owners of the planet Earth. While on the surface, on the other side of the Red Sea, eastward of Eden in Chaldea, the demon beings Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma were coming back and forth to Earth from their star constellation Procyon, the planet Nirvana, for thousands of years. They were savage animals and are also called Chaldea, meaning demons. They became known as the original Asiatics. While all of this was going on, there were different kinds of evolutionary humans and behemoths that were living on this planet Earth. In that same era also, you had genius Homo, the Australopithecus. The Australopithecus was a creature who lived many millions of years ago. They differed chiefly in size. There were 2 types of Australopithecus. The first form was those who stood 4 feet and they could walk erect. The second form was the Java man, who was called Pithcaniperus, meaning monkey man or ape man. The other species was Paranthropus. Then you had other types like the Neanderthal who lived for 100,000 years and then disappeared. And then there is the Cro-Magnon, who was said to have roamed Europe 400,000 years ago, including Homo erectus and many other species in between. The Peking man also belonged to this species, who was here 500,000 years ago, long thought to be along the migration of modern man. The Peking man was a type of prehistoric man who lived about 370 and 500 years ago in what is now northern China. Members of this species, Homo erectus, erect man, stood 5 feet tall or 150 centimeters tall. They had a brain about twice the size of an Australopithecus. Most of these species of evolutionary man came from the apes family. Among the different species of ape man, you have the black-haired lar. This is where you get the word lord or master from. The lars from the plural for lar were recognized for their intelligence. These lars were the head monkeys or spiritual monkeys. While known, this is where the word monks came from. When the Anunnaki chose to breed by gene splicing, those Geshtu, one of the Anunnaki and Ninti, to breed the first mammy here. They chose to breed with the lars because of their high intelligence. The red-haired orangutan was also a very intelligent ape, and the brown and black-haired chimpanzees had the best brains on the scale of evolution. The orangutan is a large, rare ape. Some males have an arm spread of 7.5 feet, one of the largest of all the apes. The orangutan's arms reach to its ankles when it stands. The orangutan lives in trees and rarely comes down to the ground. It moves through the forest by climbing from branch to branch. The orangutan feeds off fruit and leaves. The other type was the chimpanzee. The chimpanzee has the intellect of a 4-year-old child and can be brought up to the level of a 7 or 8-year-old. The chimpanzee is one of the most intelligent animals and resembles human beings more than any other animal. They usually walk on all fours and stand erect when excited to bring to see over tall grass. The orangutans were used, and here's some pictures of them that they have, obviously. All right. Certain beings to bring to earth. They used the species known as the baboon and the dog-like monkey and the orangutans together. The baboon is a large monkey. It has a large head and long, sharp teeth, and a muzzle much like that of a dog. A baboon's arms are about as long as his legs. Some baboons have short, stumpy tails, but others have tails more than 2 feet long. The baboons are part hyena, jackal, and monkey. The breeding with them resulted in your Bahamu type of carnivorous man called mankind. One of the many species of Caucasians, you have the red-haired, light green-eyed, yellow-haired, blue-eyed, brown-haired, gray-eyed, and many others. While on the other hand, certain beings use the chimpanzee and the gibbon, which are an offshoot of the lars, for breeding. Then are several species of gibbons. They all have long arms and no tail. Gibbons travel through the tops of trees in small groups. A group usually consists of a male, a female, and 1 or 2 youngs. The chimpanzee and gibbons evolved into humans, and they became your Nubians and original pygmy tribe. Their woolly hair comes from the supreme beings within 24 strands of genes coated in melanin. These are the original Anunnaki Elohim, the guardians of the Nuwapians with 9 ether, who in skin color were olive as green as the greenest of olives. Gibbons is the smallest of the apes. It is also range over a wider area than the other members of the ape family, the chimpanzee, gorilla, and orangutan. The dog race was called Bahamu. They are the beasts. They were part orangutan and part baboon, called the beasts of the field. They were the fierce ones. Only some of these apes were used for breeding. Like you see a dog with that snout, that derived from those baboon beings, basically, that have that snout, that long snout. That's where the dog derived. They were part orangutan and part baboon, called the beast of the field. They were the fierce ones. Only some of these apes were used for breeding. And on the other hand, some of these beings weren't touched at all. They just kept on evolving. They all have 6 ether as well as all the other animals on the planet Earth. While all of this was going on, the larger meat-eating dinosaurs were eating and destroying everything. The early humans were dying out and proto-mammals were at the brink of extinction. So the elder thought that it was a great idea to destroy the planet and replenish it again. Then the Great Extinction hit 250,000 years ago. The second big meteorite shower hit planet Earth 2,250,000 years ago. Most of the prehistoric man and dinosaurs were destroyed. The surviving tribes were the Pygmies, the Watusis, and the Hindus. The Pygmy who had mixed with the agreeable Grammadians and the Watusi who had mixed with the disagreeable reptilians were led into shelters beneath the earth. Some went behind waterfalls and in caves and caverns of the planet Earth to survive, while the Hindu tribe went back to their planet called Nirvana and the Canis Minor star constellation. The story of humans we now know that tells of a group mammals called primates takes us back some 45 or 50 million years when a common ancestor of monkey, apes, and human appeared in Africa. 25 million or 30 million years later, that is how slowly the wheels of evolution turn and the precursor of the great apes branch off the primate line. In the 1920s AD, fossils of this early ape proconsul were found by chance on an island in Lake Victoria. Besides proconsul fossils, they also discovered in the area remains of Ramapithecus, the first erect ape or man-like primate. It was some 14 million years old, some 8 or 10 million years up. The evolutionary tree from proconsul. The richest fossil finds have been in Oduva, George in Tanzania near Lake Rudolph, renamed Lake Turkana in Kenya, and in the Afar province of Ethiopia. A Neanderthal skull was found near the Nile in Egypt, which dated back to 80,000 years old. Became a person's DNA, keeps getting mixed by the genes of the generational fathers. Comparisons of the DNA in the nucleus of the cell, which comes half from mother and half from father, do not work well after several generations. It was discovered that in addition to the DNA and the cell's nucleus, some DNA exists in the mother cell, but outside of the nucleus in bodies called mitochondria. This DNA does not get mixed with the father's DNA. Instead, it is passed on unaltered from mother to daughter to granddaughter and on through the generation. Thus, it is perfect to trace ancestral relation. Y'all following me? What's good with the collective? See somebody joining. I'm going to pay attention to the comments a little bit. Let's see here. Big Ashe. Let me bring this down here. Sorry about that. We taking in all the knowledge. Yes, indeed. What's good, family? What's good? What's good? Hopefully y'all grounded as well and trained a little bit. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of information. Peace, God. Peace to the family. Peace to the collective. Yeah, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of information to delve into. I know y'all feel the energy hitting the planet. We've been getting a lot of solar flares as well. We've been getting bombed with the solar flares. Thanks. So these Anunnaki mixed their DNA with some animals to create different species. According to this text, this planet was a huge testing facility. All right. Planet Tiamat was a huge testing facility. All right. And these Anunnaki pretty much are us. We are these beings in essence. All right. The 9 ether is a representation of extraterrestrial. All right. So follow that. We were all over the cosmos. We were on Mars. We were everywhere. All right. But we have multiple intrinsic metals in us. All right. Some of the reasons now, if you follow the text as well, they may mention that we were green. We were primarily because of the magnesium content in our skin before it converted to iron. We had, this is why Osiris is generally depicted as green. Peace, family, peace. Keep reading, man. Keep reading. You want me to keep reading? I'm gonna read a little bit more. I'll read a little bit more. I wanted to pay attention to the comments, see if y'all have questions or anything. Tell them about the tribes and practices. Where else we at? Let's see here. So now, basically, it was a crash that hit this planet that caused the Grand Canyon too. And it made mention of the Meldekians, the extraterrestrials, and a lot of these beings were also mixing their genetics with the humans as well. I mean, unwillingly. So we had the beings that were inhabiting with the Dogon tribe that were mixing with their genetics as well. And then you had the Anunnaki, their eugenics program. So everything, I mean, this whole planet was a testing facility. And then these beings, when they inhabited the different beings, they were actually mating with the humans that was here as well. So it was a lot going on. It was a lot going on. There's a lot of us that's mixed with different things. Real talk. And this is why our telomeres was capped off. All right. This is why they basically stopped us from fully activating our full genetics, because they didn't know what we would fully and what we would be. We are actually a lot more powerful than you think. Once our full DNA is activated, we're going to have access to a lot more information, including some of the extraterrestrial information from these beings that during the eugenics program. And this is how the Meldekians look. The beings that crashed underneath the Bermuda Triangle. All right. They look like that. All right. Troglodytes, they were some of them were tall, some of them were about 7 foot tall, but some of them, most of the ones, the smaller ones, the leaders were about 7 foot, but the smaller ones were typically a lot smaller, like 4 foot. And then this is Nibiru. It was a massive ship. All right, massive ship. All right, and that can hold its own ecosystem. All right, it can hold and harbor its own ecosystem. Dragon blood resin right now, because we're shifting. I feel my body becoming super light. Yes, dragon blood resin is phenomenal. Yes, I definitely highly recommend that. And it's going to activate your abilities. Not only that, it's going to protect you from malevolent spirit forces and things of that nature. When you say like our moon, you got to say more than that. I don't know what you're talking about. If you're asking a question, you got to be very specific with the question. The pygmies are the oldest people on the planet. That's true. They came from the primordial waters, aquatic beings, and our Inky's people. Yes, that's facts. That's facts. That's why. That's why. What I'm getting a blank. St. Patrick's Day is predicated on the extinction of the pygmies. All right, St. Patrick's Day is horrible. All right, and this was basically a huge genocide that was done on the pygmy tribes. All right, when they talk about the leprechauns, this was actually making reference to the pygmies. All right, so yeah, all types of origin. Let's see here. And now these are the winds these are when Nibiru crashed into Tiamat. These are the 4 winds. These are the Ninga fleet. When they talk about the Ninga fleet, these are the Meldekians, and these are the ships that they were occupying. So when they talk about the 4 winds holding each side of the earth, these are the winds they're talking about. In the Bible, when they talk about the winds, this wind and all that, they're actually referring to the ships. These ships is what they was referring to. And Tiamat, the actual etymology for Tiamat means maiden of life. All right. So let's get into, hold on, let's see here. So basically what it states, and the sun is, and this was a collision that Nibiru had with Tiamat. The lower half of Tiamat was sheared off, creating what's called planet Kai right now. All right. So Tiamat originally was a huge, massive planet, huge, right? And when the other half of it hit, it basically the other portion of it coalesced and created what we know as Planet Kai. And Apsu is the sun. So let's see here. Let's get into that. Let's get into that story. That's an actual real good story. It says the grandmother ship Nibiru can hold many thousands of crown-shaped ships, but this mission had only 2,880 crown-shaped shams. It also has a fleet of 24 crystal cities, with crystal city-like domes giving them the ability to break down light as a prism would and be able to make use of the energy. It has solar panels that are the size of a pin's head or less than that, and can generate millions and millions of megawatts of energy as well. As Nibiru passed by various suns or stations set up in the galaxy, Nibiru drew an energy change from them. Nibiru was set up for holographic interdimensional transport. That is, it is capable of cloning itself holographically. All right, I've seen this in the trip before too. I've seen the ships clone itself. I really did. There was black Nubian beings, and their ship actually had the ability of cloning itself. Before I even read this, I seen that. I seen this in the trip. This is true. Interdimensional transport. That is, it is capable of cloning itself holographically to appear in more than one place at a time, making it virtually impossible to determine which the holographic projection from the original. Nibiru is capable of traveling distance from point to point or through space and time interdimensionally. It can go through time, future, or past without interfering with with now. All right, with the principle of now or then, and it is manned or over 144,000 crew members headed by 24 elite beings called Yahawians. 12 Yah agreeable and 12 Way disagreeable. They stood 7 foot tall. However, on this flight, the craft Nibiru had the first pass by the planet Ea, which means he whose house is water, and who's now called Neptune, as it did many times before. The planet Ea, Neptune, is a twin planet to the planet Anu, Uranus. By twin planet, I mean that Neptune is very similar and in some aspects identical to the planet Uranus or Uranus. The planet Uranus was originally called Katbab Shanama, the planet which is the double. Uranus is also influenced by the gravity of Neptune. The gases that make up the atmospheres of Neptune and Uranus are exactly the same. The sizes of Neptune and Uranus are similar. Their colors are identical and their rotational times are similar. Uranus being 17 hours in Earth time and Neptune's being 16.5 hours. The planet Uranus practically rotates laying down, so the size it looked at from the wrong angle can freely be mistaken. Uranus tilts at an extreme angle or 98 degrees. You could almost say that the planet lies on its side as it travels around the sun. This means that the north and south polar regions of Uranus experience alternate periods of day and shadow hour, and summer and winter, each of which is up to 42 Earth years long. The temperature of this planet Uranus on the side that is hidden from the sun is the same as on the side facing the sun. As Nibiru came nearer to Neptune, its gravitational pull caused electrical storms on that planet on that Friday afternoon at 1300 hours of Earth time, some 24 billion years ago of Earth time, and caused Nibiru to go slightly off its orbit. As the craft Nibiru passed by Neptune, the planet Uranus came from behind the planet Neptune, and it caused the appearance of a bulge. And that bulge put on Nibiru's orbit and caused the great ship Nibiru to begin to wallop in its orbit from fear of crashing. This happened because the planet Uranus was not originally seen in the solar system. When Nibiru made its first visits, Uranus moving from behind Neptune caused Nibiru to veer off its own original path in order not to hit Uranus, and it made it collide. Another planet then called Meldek, also called Vulcan. All right. So here's an example of the collision. All right. So Nibiru tried to move out the way, but apparently There was a collision. Nibiru veering outside of planet Meldeck. The original name of planet Vulcan is Meldeck. Meldeck was between Lamu, Mars, and Kishar, Jupiter. Meldeck was 27,500 miles in diameter. I'm going to pause real quick. This is why the asteroid belt is there, all right? The asteroid belt is there because of that collision. This is why small bits of the asteroid or remnants of that planet, all right? It's because of that collision, all right, that took place. Meldeck had a population of billions living under the seas and the subsidies of Karna, which was occupied by the Meldecians, and Vader, which was occupied by the Troglodytes. Meldeck also had 2 moons. This was the planet of Mamuskia, or Troglodytes, dragons, and Voltex. The Troglodytes' average height is 3.5 to 4 feet, 4.5 feet, and their heads are extremely large. These were the slaves. However, the rulers, the Meldecians, were very large in size, from 7 to 9 feet in height. Scales of multiple colors in which they shed like all other reptilians. They lay eggs for reproduction. The troglodytes have 2 round eyes without pupils and no ears or protruding noses, just 2 small holes in the nose area. Their mouths are slits without lips. The troglodytes are hairless and have no teeth. The troglodytes' hands have 4 webbed fingers and no thumbs. The troglodytes live totally underwater in great cities with many great biologists. Because they live underwater, if the planet sped up, it wouldn't affect them, because gravity is different underwater, meaning gravity is the force that the Earth exerts on its object. The force or gravity is relatively constant all over the surface of the Earth, except for in few places like the equator, and varies slightly at different altitudes. Many people think, for instance, if a steel ball was dropped from a building and a cotton ball, that the steel ball would fall a lot faster than the cotton ball, only lags slightly behind. So the force was still constant. Water is denser than air, so objects move slower through water than air. The impact of the crash affected the beings on the surface of the planet of Meldeck and not underneath the water, because water is more dense and would slow down the object. So the impact would be less damaging and the shock of the impact would be less severe. However, it was daylight, so most of the beings came on land. All of the beings that could have negotiated were dead due to the crash. The only beings that survived were the ones under the seas, which were the military and the warriors, who were looking for a chance to fight anyway. Nibiru had no way of contacting the beings on planet Meldeck to let them know that it was an accident and not a deliberate attack. Telepathic communication was forbidden to prevent interference by other telepathic disagreeable beings. This was because the Meldecians were not a part of the Interplanetary Confederation. Their star fleet of warriors, a group of reptilians who bore the symbol of a reptile who called themselves Ninga, meaning warrior, launched an attack, thinking that the planet Meldeck had been attacked. 4 fighter ships of Ninga fleet launched out, and it went off its orbit into the universe, attacked with the intentions of destroying Nibiru. These 4 ships, equipped with high explosives created of plutonium from Meldeck's star fleet called Ninga, managed to escape Meldeck as Nibiru passed by and followed in Nibiru's path. Nibiru put up its 4 magnetic force fields, which were created for Anu and given to Murdoch, and destabilized the 4 attacking ships. Nibiru created the magnetic tube called Kaaba. Then 4 great ships called the Ninga fleet moved on as 4 powerful winds that were trapped for Nibiru's force field and unable to break loose. Meldeck is now referred to as the Lost Planet. The 4 fighter ships of the Ninga fleet, also called the North Wind, South Wind, East Wind, and West Wind, then 4 fighter ships that originally surrounded Nibiru and appeared to launch an attack, were now trapped. The great ship Nibiru activated its 4 magnetic force fields, incapacitating these ships. All of their controls and equipment ceased to function. A force field was put up, and they were trapped in the environment of Nibiru. Its new wobbly satellites were caught in Nibiru's gravitational pull and began to make 4 whirlwinds. Nibiru immediately launched 2 ships to return to Elium to inform the elders of the incident in case of the need for assistance. Nibiru proceeded to move counterclockwise from the planets and the solar system. Nibiru put in towards Anshar, which means foremost of the heavens, now called Saturn, and its force field kissed off the planet, and its gravitational pull caused Nibiru to veer off its own orbit, and 3 satellites were added to Nibiru's force field called evil winds, whirlwind and matchless wind. The orbit that Nibiru was originally on was a 25,920-year orbit called Ans. It shifted into a new orbit of 3,600 years, a Shar. Its orbit was caught in this solar system, always to make a return. The Nibiru bounced off the planet Titan, which now surrounds Saturn, and sped up its motion, creating the Saturn rings referred to as the necklace of Saturn. At that point, Gaga Pluto was released from its natural orbit around the sun and was pulled away on the direction of Mars and Venus. The path of Nibiru was now bent even more towards the center of the solar system, directly towards Tiamat, which means maiden of life, now called Earth. As it moved into your solar system, Nibiru caused problems amongst the other planets in the solar system by pulling their moons. Nibiru making one complete spin through the winds off into space. The approach of Nibiru began to disturb Tiamat, and this alarmed the beings of Tiamat that something was entering their atmosphere, causing volcanic eruptions, storms, hurricanes, and flood. Tiamat was forced to launch 11 ships headed directly for this bright gleaming, or what appeared to be a planet, entering its airspace. Okay, so again, here's the pictures. Bro, you did the biggest jewel talking about back from the pyramid, but low key you was talking about X-Men. Bro, you dropped the biggest jewel talking about the car people a while back from the pyramid, but low key you was talking about X-Men. We are the X-Men, man. We are these powerful beings. All right, but let's finish reading. Let's finish reading and going into this. Tiamat was forced to launch 11 ships headed directly for this bright gleaming, or what appeared to be a planet, entering its airspace. The star fleet of 11 ships from Tiamat was led by Kingu, the great emissary, which was once ruled by the Meldekian deity Luna. The great ship Nibiru had 7 warships accompanying her, and they were launched at the 11 ships that were launched from Tiamat. Kingu was the name of the head defense force of Tiamat, and it later became the name of an imperfect planet now called a moon, one of the many moons which was originally the companion planet of Tiamat before the crash of the satellites of Nibiru. The 11 ships which were launched from Tiamat at Nibiru were immediately detected by the force field to Nibiru and eliminated. One of the 4 satellites that came with Nibiru from Meldek, called the North Wind, was linked directly for Tiamat. The impact of the North Wind caused Tiamat to split into 2 parts because of the high explosives that the ship contained, called plutonium. The hole which the North Wind bore in Tiamat caused the upper half of Tiamat to wallop in its orbit, setting large portions of it on fire. The North Wind then came back around, shattering that half into pieces, making comets, of which Halley's Comet is one, and asteroids coming from the Greek comets, long-haired star from calm hair. The length of time a comet takes to complete its orbit is known as its period. Some comets have periods of less than 7 years. Comets are considered part of the solar system since they never leave the limits of the solar system. The comet's tail always points away from the sun due to the pressure of the sun's light on the dust particles, and is usually 5,000 miles in length. Comets are often caught by a planet's gravitational pull, which causes them to shift from their course. Many of the pieces of the comet that caught on fire formed the asteroid belt that is in the center of the solar system. The east wind, another tremendous ship from Meldex coming with Nibiru from Meldex, swung around and put a hole straight through the upper half of the planet. The planet Tiamat had a turbulence and was unstable, while other planets nearby were still wobbling in their orbit. Tiamat was put in many directions on one side by the other two larger planets, Lamu, now called Mars, and Kishar, foremost of the firmlands. Jupiter on one side, and the two smaller planets, Lamu, Venus, and Mamu on the other. Mercury on its other side, all pulling and tugging. Nibiru's 7 ships broke off onto separate fleets, the first 4 cycling the planet Tiamat, which is now called Ki, creating a net-like web which was a magnetic field. One of the 3 warships from the second part of the fleet of 7 from the Nibiru, located on the outskirts of the force fields, then launched a bright flame of light, much like a ball of lightning. The ball of lightning was filled with brilliance, and it pierced straight down the east wind. So what they're saying is this light was captured and then placed in the center, forming that light that we know is in the center portion of Agartha, basically. This is the ball of lightning that shot out. So the Ninga fleet basically was trying to defend itself from what appeared to be an invasion, and they shot this ball of light out. And what basically the story is implying is that this light was captured by a magnetic force field and then basically placed in the center of Tiamat as they restabilized Tiamat. All right. And this basically this ball of light actually formed what we know as the central portion. And then if we see this picture, it's a picture of it being restabilized and the 4 winds holding it together. Now, if you look at the Bible, it talk about the 4 winds of each side of the planet. All right. This is what it's talking about. It's basically referring to those 4 winds holding it together. And they talk about an angel on each side. All right. So this is what it's referring to. The 4 winds on each side basically holding and restabilizing the planet as they basically sealed it back. All right. So let's finish going into it. All right. So let's see here. The ball of lightning was filled with brilliance, and it pierced straight down into Tiamat, completely neutralizing Tiamat's electric and magnetic force fields. A portion of this massive ball of light, which was launched for one of the 3 warships from the Nibiru, was called the West Wind, and also known as the Evil Wind, tore straight down as a ball of lightning into the center, exploded, and gouged out a large hollow space in the center of Tiamat. All right, so it created the hollow space according to this text. All right. It gouged out a large hollow space. This was war. Now, if you look at the Mahabharata and a lot of wars, it's a lot of different ancient texts to support wars that actually took place in the cosmos. All right. Research the Mahabharata, and they talk about wars that actually took place and large weapons and things of that nature that took place. In fact, there's evidence of human organs and things of that nature being formed of glass, all right, or sands being formed of glass. In order for that to happen, you need millions and millions of degrees, all right, which means that had to be some form of nuclear activity that transpired in the past, all right. But we're going to keep going. A portion of this massive ball of light, which was launched from one of the 3 warships from the Nibiru, was called the West Wind, and also known as the Evil Wind, tore straight down as the ball of lightning to the center, exploded, and gouged out a large hollow space into the center of Tiamat. And the West Wind became a tremendous 600-mile diameter sun called Sol, and was trapped in place there with the sunscreen to direct the heat waves through the North Pole, away from the planet, creating the northern lights, or what is called the Aurora Borealis, which are solar flares or sun flares. This ball of light now in the center of Tiamat was named Apsu, meaning one who exists from the beginning. And the place was named Ishara. 3 satellites launched off of Nibiru, creating a tetrahedron, 4-sided force field of energy at a 19.5 degree angle around the new half of Tiamat, with the hole through it, and the smaller sun, Sol, also called Apsu, was placed inside Tiamat's center. Now, this newly formed planet, Tiamat, called Ki, New Earth, was trapped in its orbit, where no planet had been orbiting before, protected by forces by the guidance of these ships while she healed herself. The 600-mile diameter sun called Saw Axle traveled through the great hole called the Abyss for a distance of 3,963 miles to the center of half of the planet Tiamat. 120, which is the west wind, bore a hole through called Ki, now called Earth, from the word Eridu. So it was indeed one of the satellites of Nibiru called Winds from Maldeck that crashed into Tiamat and not Nibiru itself. The Voltex troglodyte that manned this ship that crashed survived and thrived into the seas of this new planet called Ki or Gaia. Gaia even Gi, once called Tiamat, which much later became known as Earth from Eridu, starting the restoration or reconstruction of life on Earth, including evolutionary processes of plant and animal life. Now the last of the winds, the south wind, crashed into Kai and created the Canyon and gave birth to a mother small planet. And gave birth to another small planet in its own orbit and rotation around this newly formed planet Kai, which became the moon that you see today, creating a lunar orbit called Shesky, meaning celestial deity who protects Earth Ki, and called Kingu, who had become chief among them, ruled by Luna, which Murdoch Nibiru made shrink as a mass of lifeless clay and thrown into an outer space to wobble in its own orbit. Deprived of its orbital momentum, Kingu was reduced to the status of a mere satellite, a moon today known as Ceres, which is today known as the largest of the minor planets or androids. The upper half of the planet Tiamat, which became oval-shaped after the moon had broken away, was now 7,926 miles in diameter and 24,896 miles in circumference, and it was set for replenishing or restoration on a part of the Great Star Fleet responsible for its damage. That's a very interesting story. So basically, according to that text, and this is the Grand Canyon, so basically they're stating that collision is what created that massive gouge in that landmass we know as the Grand Canyon. That's very interesting. So, very interesting. So the newly formed planet Ki was trapped in its orbit, protected by forces sent from the guidance of 4 ships that were a part of the 11 from the fleet from the Nibiru, of which 2 returned back to Ilium to inform them of what had been happening. Now this new planet has 2 suns, one on its belly 3,963 miles from its surface, creating an intertropical environment, and the other sun, Shamus, was 93 million miles away from Kai's surface. Kai was now trapped in its new orbit around the outer sun, Shamus, to create a year of 365 days. Thus, a new time zone was created for this new planet. The south wind crashing into Tiamat also created a black dust cloud that cut off Earth from the sun. So now you have 2 sets of planets separated by this asteroid belt, creating the inner and outer planets. The inner planets were Mercury, Venus, the moon, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Titan, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, and now Pluto, previously called Gaga, separated by this asteroid belt, and the remains of the lost planet Meldeck. So that's wow. So one half of the original Tiamat is an asteroid belt, and the other half is presently your planet called Earth. So wow, that's very interesting. I'm gonna put my bookmarker right there. That's very interesting.